The extraordinary rendition of Janos Farkas. Chapter 4. Part 1. The drugs in the enema hadn't knocked him out, but only put him into a woozy state. His head hung and swung like a grapefruit too heavy for its branch. He tried to lift it, but it didn't respond. He had no control over his neck. His butt ached, and he tried to shift his legs to a more comfortable position. He couldn't move them. The fear that he was paralyzed from the neck down shot through him, and then he realized that if he were, he wouldn't be experiencing the pain in his butt. Concentrating on heightening his senses, he tried to feel the blood pumping through his limbs. There was heaviness in everything, but definitely a feeling. He listened to the drone. There was no mistaking it for anything other than an airplane. A hand pushed his head, and he could not stop its swing. Someone was checking to see that the drugs were still working. There was the smell of apples in the air. He heard the creak of leather and knew that whoever had pushed his head had just sat down. How long had he been in the air? The drugs made time indiscernible, and he could only guess. 6 hours, 8? If he was right, they must be either near their destination or at least somewhere where they could refuel. His guts were sore, aching from the emptiness, and he tried to squeeze them. But he had no control over those muscles either. Unable to do any more, he tried to lapse into unconsciousness, to sleep his way to whatever lay in store. But he couldn't control that either, and his head swung and his mind buzzed with possibilities, probabilities, and utter nonsense. The last minute of truth, the last minute of utter reality, was watching a rendition of Hamlet, with Ein by his side. What had happened to her? The thought of her focused his mind. Images were sharp and clear. Her wide smile almost too wide, her teeth almost too white. The way, when she wanted her way, she would turn her back slightly to him and smile over her shoulder. It was a model's pose, coy and cute, although there was nothing of the model about her. The two wide lips, teeth, and grin, the too pert nose, two bright eyes, and yet somehow it all worked. She was skinny and leggy and wispy, but he had seen her harden and knew that she was no pushover. What did he really know about her? She had graduated from Princeton University in the spring. This was her second backpacking trip to Europe. The first was 2 years ago when she had seen him at the White Elephant, but he couldn't remember her. She was an only child whose mother had died while she was very young. He had talked to her father, at least a man who said he was her father, on the phone. Her plan had been to return to the United States and teach elementary school in the fall. But she had met him, and he had changed all that. And now what? The marriage had been a fake, a ruse, a sham. Something to keep her happy, keep her in Europe, and keep her with him. The papers were real, but the junior magistrate who performed the marriage was not. He was a bit actor from the past that Janos had hired for the job. He had not meant to hurt her, and now this. He vowed that if he got free from this and found out that she had been harmed, he would unleash a torrent of terrorism unlike anything that had been seen before. Gritting his teeth, he pushed hard with his muscles and felt them move. He was gaining his muscles back. That would open up new possibilities. "He's coming out of it," a voice said. "Shall I give him another shot?" The smell of apples came closer, and Janos felt a hand push his head. He let it swing more than it needed to. "No," Applebreast said. "He's still drugged enough. It's almost 9 o'clock, so we'll be landing soon, and it will be a hell of a lot easier moving him if he can walk himself." Almost 9 o'clock. Janos thought back. It had been just after midnight when the thing at the theater had happened. There had been the ride to the airport, and then the humiliation. He remembered waiting on the runway for takeoff. That left a flight of between 7 and 8 hours, too far for France, England, Sweden, or Italy. Maybe Russia. But then Russians didn't involve themselves in things like this. That left the Middle East. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, maybe even Egypt. The Americans had used all of these places in the past, and Janos had no doubt he was in the hands of the Americans. He knew too much about extraordinary renditions to mistake this one. The kidnapping, the stripping, the enema, the diaper, the jumpsuit, the night flight. It was something every terrorist knew about. It was part of the game. He was about to become one of the disappeared. That's the end of part 1 of chapter 4. Sarajevo. It bears few of the scars of the longest siege in modern military history, the rubble of the cannon already having been replaced by the rubble of the architect, with their new office towers and skyscrapers. It is small as capitals go, with a population of less than 500,000, and without the hustle and bustles of a Paris or London or Berlin. Taxi driving is hard work here. The tram system makes getting around too easy and too convenient for people to shell out hard money for the service, and taxi drivers often resort to various overcharging scams to make ends meet. Making ends meet was not a high priority for Spencer Elliott. Once a week he would go to the main post office and collect a package. Inside the package would be a video or audio tape, some photographs, documentation, and always a money order to cover his expenses. He would cash the money order at one of the large bank-like windows and pay for his apartment, groceries, and other expenses out of his pocket. He had no bank account. Alone in his room, he would study the papers, tapes, and photos until each item, each piece was glued into his memory. Then he would take the package and place it on top of his tall old wardrobe before going out. Each night when he got home, the package would be gone. One day he put it there before he went through it, and when he got home it was already gone. He panicked as he felt for it, and a shiver ran through him as he wondered what had been in it. What piece of the puzzle that might one day catch him up? For Spencer Elliott, driving a taxi was not a profession but an education. It gave him the freedom and excuse to explore Sarajevo on a level not possible for a sightseer or a tourist. It also allowed him to drive into the country where he needed first-hand knowledge of the towns and terrain, particularly the area around Debaj. And, most importantly, it allowed him to study the idiosyncrasies of the Bosnian language as the natives of Sarajevo spoke it. Walking into the post office, he went to a wicket, staffed by a middle-aged woman with blondish hair that flowed into a face, that flowed into a large neck, that flowed into dumpy shoulders, giving her a shape like a full-size Russian stacking doll. Even before he got there, even before he showed his passport, she was sorting through the box where his package would be. She shook her head. He asked her to look again, checking the name on his passport, as if that were necessary. She went back to the box. Finding nothing, she went to 2 other postal clerks, who each shook their heads. "Nothing?" he asked. "No," she answered. "Nothing for you today, maybe tomorrow." "It is Monday, isn't it?" "All day," she replied with a smile. In Spencer Elliott's new life, Mondays and Tuesdays didn't get mixed up. There was a clock-like accuracy to it. He was at a loss as to what to do. Perhaps there would be something waiting for him at his room. In his preoccupation, he did not notice when he got back into his taxi that there was a man sitting in the back. He was startled when the voice behind him said, "Airport, please, Mr. Boyd." Spencer swung around. It was Peter James, sunglasses and all. "You," he said. "Me," James replied. "You ready, Tim?" he asked. It's been a year since I've been called Tim, Spencer replied. It seems like another life, another person. He sat silently looking beyond Peter James, seeing something that wasn't there, something that only had been there. How's my father, he asked. Does he know? Your father knows what he needs to know. He knows that you are doing important work. That's all. That's enough, Tim. That's so strange. I know I shouldn't call you Tim, but it's the last time until this is over. The next contact you meet will only know you as Spencer Elliott. They have no reference to any Tim Boyd. Spencer sat there, not asking, not wanting to ask, the question that was on his mind. When? I need to get to the airport, James said. I presume you know the way. I am a taxi driver. What time's your flight? Not until later in the day, but it's not my flight we have to catch. It's yours. It leaves in less than an hour. I have your ticket. Arrangements have been made. That's the end of Chapter 4. Tomorrow, Chapter 5.